Hello and greetings to you, dear Tom, and thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I am Ashtyako Poorkarim, a political activist, Middle East affairs analyst, and currently the leader of the Kurdistan independence movement. Our movement is founded on the fundamental principle of the right of nations to self-determination and is based on democratic, secular, and human rights values. The goal of our movement is to end the historical occupation of Kurdistan's lands, which have been occupied by the Iranian regime, and to achieve national independence for the Kurdish people. For years, we have been active in the field of national struggles, pro-freedom diplomacy, and organizing Kurdish political forces, both inside the country and in exile. We believe that at this critical juncture in Middle Eastern history, the Kurdish people must, with awareness, cohesion, and unity with other oppressed peoples of Iran and the occupied lands, pave the way for their own liberation, freedom, and independent sovereignty. Yes, in recent days, Eastern Kurdistan has once again witnessed widespread, targeted, and brutal repression by the occupying regime of the Islamic Republic of Iran. According to credible report from human rights sources and independent media, during the recent war between Iran and Israel alone, and especially after the ceasefire was announced, at least 600 Kurdish men and women have been arrested and imprisoned on charges such as sympathizing with Israel, engaging in civil activism, or simply because of their Kurdish identity. These arrests are part of a plan that goes beyond mere securitization. This project is part of the regime's structural effort to control the Kurdish nation through fear and silent elimination. During this same period, 3 young Kurdish porters and tradesmen who were simply working to make a living along the artificial borders between Iran and Iraq were executed by the regime on fabricated charges of collaborating with Mossad. This crime is not a random incident, but rather part of a systematic project of gradual cleansing of Kurdish identity, pursued through means such as physical repression, psychological warfare, economic impoverishment, cultural destruction, and forced migration. In fact, the intensification of the Iranian regime's repressive measures against the Kurdish nation is a response to the Islamic Republic's geopolitical instability at the regional and global levels. With the gradual collapse of the regime's proxy arms in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, the Islamic Republic's leadership is trying to restore and reinforce its shaky foundations of power by exerting intense pressure on oppressed peoples, especially the Kurdish nation in Eastern Kurdistan. These crackdowns are not only a reaction to the protest uprisings and national awakening in Eastern Kurdistan, but on a deeper level, they are a preemptive measure, an attempt to prevent the formation of a national revolution inspired by regional developments and the collapse of Iran's spheres of influence. To put it more clearly, the Islamic Republic fears the political awareness, national unity, and will for liberation of the Kurdish people more than it fears their weapons. The enemy is afraid of our awakening, not our weapons. Well, the Kurdish people's response to this wave of repression is a conscious and organized transition from scattered protests to the stage of a national uprising. This response is not limited to taking to the streets and chanting slogans. Rather, we are laying the foundations for a comprehensive national resistance, from establishing media, legal and information networks to educating and organizing the younger generation. From strengthening the diaspora and global capacities to consolidating diplomatic and international ties. All of these are part of our long-term project to reclaim the right to national sovereignty. Repression did not scatter us. It made us more united, more determined, and more strategic. We are no longer merely reacting to oppression. We are designing and building a new future, a future in which sovereignty will rest with the people. Despite the ongoing differences of opinion among various Kurdish factions, today more than ever, the need for unity and solidarity among the political forces of Eastern Kurdistan is being felt. The region's critical situation, the collapse of central authority in Iran, and the awakening of nations have all placed us before a historic responsibility as the independence movement in Eastern Kurdistan. We believe that now is not the time for appeasement, hesitation, or compromise with this regime. Today, forming a unified front beyond ideology and based on national responsibility for coordination on three levels, on the ground, in the media, and politically, is a strategic necessity, not merely a tactical choice. Accordingly, as part of the collective of parties and political movements in Eastern Kurdistan, we have held meetings in recent weeks and months to develop a joint platform. The result of these efforts will soon be officially announced in the form of two coalitions. The Coalition of Independence-Seeking Parties and Movements of Eastern Kurdistan and the Coalition of Federalist Parties and Forces. At the same time, our vision is not limited to Eastern Kurdistan alone. In line with forming a resistance bloc of oppressed nations in Iran, practical steps are being taken to establish a broad transnational and multinational front. A front composed of the political forces of non-Persian nations, including the Baloch, the Ahwazi Arabs, Azerbaijani Turks, Caspians, and other nations sharing the same fate. This process marks the beginning of a phase in struggle for the right to self-determination and transition to a just multinational order. In other words, in the near future, the fabricated geography known as Iran will no longer exist and will be divided into at least 6 independent countries. This is in fact our goal and our mission. Given the intensification of the security atmosphere and the expansion of organized repression by the Islamic Republic regime, it is expected that in the near future, we will witness even broader popular uprisings in Eastern Kurdistan. But unlike in the past, this time, the popular movements will not be merely reactive or spontaneous. Rather, they will take on a purposeful, organized, and strategic character. At the same time as government pressures increase, underground resistance networks are expanding. Guerrilla training is becoming institutionalized, and the field map of the struggle has entered a new phase. On the other hand, the Kurdish diaspora, by playing an active role in exposing the regime's crimes and garnering international support, has become a complementary force in this multi-layered struggle. Overall, the future outlook of the battleground in Eastern Kurdistan is moving toward a decisive, organized, and national confrontation. Yes, without a doubt, we are on the verge of entering a new phase of the national struggle in Eastern Kurdistan. This struggle is not merely a temporary reaction to the regime's repression, but rather part of a historical and purposeful process aimed at transitioning to national sovereignty. As I mentioned, the upcoming struggle will be multi-layered and intertwined. On one hand, there is civil resistance in the form of nationwide strikes, civil disobedience, and social mobilization. On the other hand, there is military organization to defend the people against repression and to exercise real sovereignty in the areas under our control. At the same time, we will seriously pursue diplomatic avenues to have the Kurdish nation's right to self-determination recognized at the international level. We will also expand the project of exposing the regime's crimes and independently narrating the realities of Kurdistan by utilizing media tools. This struggle is not merely aimed at overthrowing the Islamic Republic regime, but at replacing it with a democratic system, whether federal or independent, based on the free will of the peoples, especially the Kurdish nation. We will continue on this path with wisdom, unity, reliance on the people's will, and solidarity with other oppressed nations in Iran. The Kurdish nation has never been and will never be hostile toward the Jewish people or the state of Israel. On the contrary, these two nations have historically, especially in the land of Kurdistan, maintained peaceful human relations and a culture of coexistence. There is abundant historical evidence showing that Jews have lived peacefully and with respect alongside the Kurdish people in many cities and villages of Kurdistan, especially in Suleymaniya, Erbil, Zakho, Mahabad, Sanandaj, Kermanshah, and even remote villages, and have been an inseparable part of the social and economic life of these regions. After the establishment of the State of Israel, many of these Kurdish Jewish families returned to their ancestral homeland. Today, thousands of Israeli citizens are of Kurdish descent and have continued to keep these emotional, cultural, and familial ties alive. This relationship is not merely a political connection, but a historical, deep-rooted bond akin to that of a family. In recent years, with the increased repression of the Kurdish people by the Islamic Republic of Iran and fabricated accusations such as spying for Israel or sympathizing with Zionists, which have been used as pretext to arrest and even execute Kurdish youths, this relationship has not only failed to weaken, but the solidarity of the Kurdish people with the people of Israel and the concept of Jewish resistance has deepened. For many Kurds, Israel is not just a state, but a symbol of national survival, the will for freedom, and the embodiment of the right of nations to self-determination. In this context, our Kurdish perspective on Israel has become more ethical, resistant, and strategic than ever before. For us, relations with Israel are not merely a political choice, but a moral statement against the religious fascism ruling Iran. It is a profound and enduring kind of historical solidarity that exists between two deeply oppressed peoples who have bravely stood together against persistent denial and the brutal cleansing of their very identity. The greatest and most dangerous misconception about us, the Kurds of Eastern Kurdistan or Kurdistan under Iranian occupation, is reducing us to an ethnic minority within Iran. This interpretation not only distorts our historical and political reality, but is exactly the same perspective that occupying regimes have promoted over the past century to deny the existence of the Kurdish nation. We are a historic nation with our own language, culture, land, flag, and independent political memory, separated only by the artificial borders of Sykes-Picot. We are not fighting to reform an oppressive system or to claim a share in Iran's decaying structure. We are fighting to end the occupation, restore national sovereignty, and establish an independent Kurdish state in eastern Kurdistan, just as the Jewish people, after enduring exile and genocide, succeeded in reclaiming their land and national state. The Kurdish nation is now on the path to restoring its own sovereignty. The message I would like to convey to the Israeli audience is that we are the natural and strategic partner of any nation that believes in freedom, security, and the right to self-determination. We are not a threat, but rather an opportunity for stability, regional alliances, and shaping a new Middle Eastern order that is no longer built on the denial of nations and identities. According to independent estimates and reputable demographic sources, the population of Kurds living in the region known as Iran is estimated to be between 13 and 15 million people. Meanwhile, the Iranian regime has never provided accurate statistics on non-Persian ethnic groups and nations, and has deliberately tried to deny the multi-ethnic and multinational reality of this land by omitting ethnic data from censuses. Nevertheless, the significant Kurdish population in Iran faces systematic repression, structural discrimination, and assimilation policies. But we Kurds still remain deprived of the most basic human rights. In addition, the Iranian regime's policies in the regions of eastern Kurdistan have involved securitizing public spaces, heavy deployment of military forces, severe cultural censorship, and the implementation of economic deprivation projects. The result of this approach has been the spread of systematic poverty, widespread unemployment, forced migration, and the emergence of a deep rift between the Kurdish people and the central government. In fact, in our own homeland, where our history and culture are rooted, we are regarded as political outsiders. This is not a coincidence, but rather part of the Iranian regime's deliberate policy of identity cleansing, which seeks to legitimize its territorial existence by denying ours. Yet, despite all the pressures, the Kurdish people have continued their national existence and are now more ready than ever to claim their right to self-determination and to restore their historical sovereignty. The behavior of the Iranian regime toward the Kurdish people, both during the Islamic Republic and under the previous Pahlavi regime, has always been marked by systematic discrimination, brutal repression, and denial of our national identity. The ruling regimes in Iran have never recognized the Kurdish nation as equal citizens. Instead, they have always treated us as a security threat. From the assassination of our political leaders, both inside and outside the country, to the bloody suppression of uprisings and civil movements, from the widespread execution of political and cultural activists to the killing of defenseless coal bars in the border mountains, our history is filled with clear examples of this structural oppression. The Kurdish language has been banned in ceremonies and the media. Our villages have been bombarded by artillery and fighter jets, and even the smallest legal demands have been met with imprisonment, torture, and death. This situation is not limited to recent times or regional tensions, but rather has its roots in the discriminatory and chauvinistic structure of the Iranian regime. What we are witnessing today in the streets of Mahabad, Sanandaj, Saqiz, Kermanshah, and Ilam is a continuation of the same repressive policies that have targeted the Kurdish people for decades. Therefore, our resistance is not a temporary reaction, but the continuation of a historic struggle for survival, freedom, self-determination, independence, and the establishment of an independent Kurdistan state.